Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. I'm Tom Keene, along with Paul Sweeney. Join us each day for insight from the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app. I learned this. I sort of stumbled into this. It wasn't a received wisdom when I was 28 or whatever. There are exactly two people on the strategy side. Fancy academic people that have never enjoyed the bid walking away from them. Mm-hmm. And then there's people that migrate from a trading desk, a rates desk, over to strategy and portfolio management.
Who does that?
They're different.
Yep.
They're hardwired. You learn this at Villanova. And I think Kristina, it's just the real deal because she's enjoyed having the bid walk away from her.
Bid walk away. Kristina Campmany joins us. She's a senior portfolio manager at Invesco. As a senior portfolio manager, what does your portfolio look like these days? How is it allocated? How is it structured? How's your portfolio structured today?
Of course. So thank you guys so much for having me in. So I work on our global debt team. And so our universe that we look at is rates, currencies, and FX globally. And rates, currencies, and credit. And I think when we look at the world right now, one of the primary drivers, we're finally at this precipice of the Fed starting their easing cycle. So many other central banks have been waiting for their cues from the Fed, especially the emerging market central banks that started their easing early and now have been kind of waiting. So there's a big focus on currencies, especially right now, because I think that's where the big driver is, and it's U.S. central of what's driving it and where are we going from here. And I think when we look at rates, especially in developed markets, it's a little less interesting from what do we want to own out the curve, because there's not a lot of value of how low rates still are and how flat and inverted the curves are.
So, all right, so I can sit, as Tom knows, I'm happy to sit in my 2-year treasury getting near 4%. How much credit, I assume you guys are not just doing that. You're taking some credit risk maybe. How do you think about that?
We are. So you said you'd be happy to sit in the front end.
Sure.
And I think that makes sense when we look at rates. And in a lot of sense, it makes sense when we look at credit as well. You can be parked in front end high grade credit and even emerging market high grade credit in the front end. And we think there's some value there. But again, out the curve, things are a lot richer. And we don't think that there's a lot of value. Just as we have this normalization, we need to have a reprice there.
But I'm looking at the U.S. Corporate High Yield Index, the Bloomberg U.S. Corporate High Yield Index. We paid good money for that index, 6.29%. That is nice. How do you like to think about high yield?
But again, if you think about cash, where you're getting for your cash earnings it's really about spread. And I think there is this concept in the market of investors do care about all-in yield, but I think you have to break it down and look at spreads, and spreads are at historically tight levels. I mean, we had a little bit of blowing out with the noise early in August. Yeah, but the quickness with which we snapped back, I think, is telling of what is positioning out there. What do we need to be concerned with? Are you susceptible to this again?
To translate that, the bid was put in non-full faith and credit paper, snapped right back like equities?
Yeah.
Why? What is the reason for the bid there? Is it just desperation to capture coupon? Fobosi 101, what's the why?
I think it's a combo of both. I think that there's when you have just cash returns where they are, funds perpetually have money that they need to invest. Right. And I think that there's a comfort, which is where we kind of fall down the middle on the economic outlook, that we're not looking for a recession. We think that the Fed has this balance. They're going to start. The question of 25 or 50 is not about a recession to us. It's about we've been tight long enough and we can kind of adjust. I
mean 2 years ago, my essay of the year was Lawrence McDonald, the author, writing out just an incredibly clear dissertation of the wall of money that's out there. You're in the turret at Invesco of guessing where that money's going to flow. Adjust that now post Labor Day. Where is the wall of cash going to flow?
So I think every year in September, you have massive amount of corporate supply. So certainly that will be a recipient. And then I think it really is about this. What defines the month of September will be the Fed beginning their easing cycle. That has been this 2-year waiting period of, is the Fed going to go? Are we on the precipice of recession? Do we have to go? And I think that allows people to put money back into the market and say, what are we comfortable with? Where do we want to
But Paul, good morning, Larry McDonald. I mean, he hasn't done anything since that essay of the year. He just checked out. He's been on the beach. But Paul, to me, the heart of the matter is the importance of September.
Yeah,
is a signal.
I know. Hopefully, we'll have a smooth month. Kristina, how do you think this Fed's going to proceed here? Do you think they start this month and then, I don't know, every other meeting, 50 basis points, 25 basis points? How are you guys on your desk thinking about that?
So I think Friday's payroll report will be really important to just set the tone.
Again, I'm in the office Friday, just pointing it out to everybody.
And in some sense, it is silly that we are, even at this point, for the start of a cycle that has been years in the making, we're concerned about a data print that's a few days away.
Right.
But again, our view is that we're talking about a soft landing, and I'd say our base case is still that we're going to get more of a mid-cycle adjustment from the Fed rather than that they need to ease to neutral, which means you probably, if they start with a 50, you might get 100 by year end, 100 basis points. But I think that that's really the outlook into 25 is a lot less clear because you need election results and what has that adjustment.
I mean, Kristina Campmany, this is, we don't do anything here. All we do is read questions on YouTube. This is from YouTube. Please comment on portfolios for individuals separating out risk assets. I don't have 50% of my money in fixed income, but I don't have 100% in equities. I mean, is like 60-40 part of the Invesco discussion, or have you come up with new math?
I think that still is kind of how we think about the balance. And I think the difference in this day and age where we've returned after the GFC and you've had this extended period of near zero front-end rates, cash as an allocation in that mix for the individual makes sense too, right, to balance.
Are there sectors in the fixed income space that screen well for you guys at Invesco these days?
So again, when we look, I think when we look at particular opportunities in the market, in rates, it's more of a curve trade and that readjustment. Currencies look interesting to us because we think in either case, you have this push and pull of what has buoyed the dollar, and you've had U.S. exceptionalism, but the other side of it is you have massive funding needs from the government and all this treasury issuance that needs to be funded. We think that as you embark on this easing cycle, you could have a period of a weaker dollar, and thus there's a lot of currencies that are interesting to us. And then emerging market, fixed income as well, local market debt also looks interesting because the Fed starts, these emerging market central banks can continue their easing cycles, and you have some opportunity there.
One final question. Are you managing for coupon or total return?
Total return. It always has to be about total return.
It has to be. You can't get a job. Yeah, okay.
See,
Kristina Campmany, thank you so much with Invesco. Joining us right now, very important conversation. Matt Hornbach joins us right now, Global Head of Macro Strategy at Morgan Stanley. Matt, do you have to aggressively rewrite your macro strategy into Q4?
Tom, thanks for having me on the program. I don't think we're going to have to aggressively rewrite the outlook. I mean, the risks that we put out there relative to our baseline forecasts were pretty clear in that we did see downside risks to the U.S. Treasury yields. And so I don't think we'll have to dramatically change the narrative as those risks are now being realized. But we probably will have to make some adjustments to our baseline yield forecast at some point here soon.
Right. With your world-class view of Japan earned at Morgan Stanley, is it all quiet on the Japanese front?
Well, for now, yes, it seems to be. But our economists do think the Bank of Japan will have the data it needs to raise rates once more, but only once more. And I think in order to get investors really excited about Japan in 2025, you're going to need more than just one more rate hike from the Bank of Japan. So for now, we think it's going to be pretty quiet, but it could get interesting, particularly because positioning in the market vis-a-vis Japan still exists. It's still a story people want to trade. That means people want to see yields in Japan go higher. They want to see the yen continue to depreciate, and it could get interesting because those hopes and dreams may come crashing down if inflation in the country starts to moderate again.
So, Matt, I'm just, I know you spent a lot of time back and forth stationed in Tokyo, and I remember when Tokyo was the place to be outside of New York. Why are investors paying so much attention to Japan over the last 12, 18, 24 months, even Warren Buffett, when for 20 years we could care less what happened to Japan? What's changed?
Well, yeah, I mean, Japan is definitely a good place to be for your personal life, but you're right. I think one of the things that has changed is the inflationary environment in Japan has shifted pretty dramatically over the past couple of years. Bear in mind that for the better part of the 2.5 or 3 lost decades that we had in the country of Japan, that inflation couldn't get out of bed for anyone. And now we finally have inflation that at one point was higher than 2% on the underlying measures that you can look at. That's now come down a bit below 2%, but nevertheless, it's really an inflation story.
Is the Fed the central banker of the world? I mean, in the global mandate that you've got there with the terrific economic work of Morgan Stanley, and that, is it a pivot point around Jerome Powell in the Fed, or is it more diffuse now in terms of monetary dynamics?
Well, I think certainly today the focus has really been on the Fed, and that's somewhat a shame because you do have a lot of different central banks around the world doing different things with their monetary policy toolkits, and so yes, it's true that the ECB is easing, and the Bank of Canada is easing, and the Bank of England is easing policy. But they're kind of going about it all somewhat differently, and I think that's a pretty unique environment, certainly for the past half a decade or two, or a full decade. Mm-hmm. That's pretty unique that they're all doing slightly different things. What's
the character of this bull market that you see?
Well, look, this is at the moment a slightly different bull market for bonds than we've seen historically. Mostly because the yield curve remains very inverted. This is not common. This happens less than 10% of the time, going back as far as the data will allow us to go back on the yield curve. This is a pretty unique period of time for the Treasury market. Right. And so, this bull market ultimately is being held back to a certain degree by the inversion of the yield curve. It makes owning Treasury securities less attractive when the yield curve is inverted.
Then what's the dynamic of a disinverting yield curve? The fact is, through August, we see massive 2s10 disinversion, right?
For 2s10s, absolutely right, Tom. I think a lot of investors who have increasingly been going into money market funds are not really comparing the 10-year yield to the 2-year yield these days. They're really comparing the 10-year yield to what they can get in a money market fund. And that yield curve is still extraordinarily inverted. So you're right. 2s10s, not so much anymore.
Matt, thanks for the clinic. Matt Hornbach with a brief there, Morgan Stanley Global. First of all, afterthoughts and orientation today, school tomorrow. Big. I mean, these are huge moments. Then we got like a whole bunch of economic data. Thank for Jobs Day. None of it matters because then, we get to the debate.
Yeah.
Joining us now, surveillance debate correspondent, host of The Big Take, David Gura. joins us
Orientation
as well.
matters, I should say. I've been told that. I got to be there for it.
The ice cream truck. The ice cream truck is wheeled up in front of the school. What a con job, David. I got to ask you about what we witnessed over the weekend. I don't buy it for a minute. At the debate, everyone helping Trump, everyone helping Harris is going to say America doesn't care about foreign policy. Am I off the mark?
Well, I think that it's something you don't hear a lot about on the campaign trail traditionally, but what we had happen over the weekend is so tragic and heartbreaking and obviously kickstarted a fresh round of protests in Israel. It's something that's going to be front and center on everyone's mind this week and leading into the debate next week. So I suspect that they're going to be asked about it. We've already heard from former President Trump on social media, his take on sort of what led to that moment and what would have been different if he had been in the White House. So I think that they'll be asked about it. I think that we keep seeing these things that aren't customarily part of campaigns percolate up. Foreign policy, I would say this time around, is certainly one of them.
Does President Trump have a special relationship with Mr. Netanyahu?
They get along very well, and they have historically, although there was a breach in that relationship at the end of Donald Trump's term in office when Benjamin Netanyahu waited did not embrace what Donald Trump thought, which is that he won the election. Of course, he didn't. And that soured things. But the two of them have known each other for a long time and have a familiarity with one another. And I think it's safe to say that the former president feels like that relationship between the two of them is stronger than the one that has been tested, shall we say, between Netanyahu and Biden, Netanyahu and Harris over these last many months.
David, are we going to have a debate? When is it? And what should we expect?
Debate is going to be on Tuesday of next week in Philadelphia at Independence Hall, and obviously it's closely watched. We've heard that from both campaigns, of course. There was a lot of fighting over what it might look like, how it might take place, if it might take place. Both agreed to it, both see it as being important. We had a memo from the campaign chair for the Harris-Walz campaign over the weekend in which she acknowledged that this is going to be a really crucial moment for them to try to break through to this small sliver of undecided people. I mean, this memo from this campaign chair was so fascinating to me. So this is from Jen O'Malley Dillon, who was head of the Biden campaign previously. Mm-hmm. And she had a stunning acknowledgement in that memo, which is they see themselves as the clear underdogs here. And they also acknowledge the fact that this is going to be decided by a very razor-thin margin. So any moment like this, they see as an incredibly important opportunity to try to break through and again get to that small group of people.
Do we know is Vice President Harris, is she a good debater? Not a good debater? Is the expectation that she can go up against a very big presence like former President Trump?
She's done it before, so we think back to the vice presidential debate the last time around when she comported herself very well against Mike Pence, the former vice president, on the debate stage. Of course, she ran for president herself in 2019, didn't make it to 2020, but is a former prosecutor, of course, and has a very prosecutorial style. And I think that's something that came out and was a really interesting contrast in the one interview that she's done in recent days with CNN. She trying to be the one answering questions, not prosecuting the argument as she has. So it'll be interesting to see. And of course, that contrast is something that's so astonishing. And then, Paul, something that really stood out to me from that CNN interview was this admission on Vice President Harris's part that she's actually never met Donald Trump, never been in the same room as him. So that'll be a really kind of interesting dynamic to observe and watch as they take the stage in Philadelphia.
Where are the rules of the debate right now? Like, I thought the last time around was hermetically sealed. Would be my sophisticated analysis.
It seems less hermetically sealed than the CNN one, in which we were kind of held, the press was held in this building 500 yards away from the room in which the debate was taking place. I think we're still figuring out sort of what the rules are going to be in terms of who's let into the hall. I don't think that it'll be a boisterous rally type atmosphere. There will be kind of a pool of reporters and photographers who are going to be in the room.
Do they get to interrupt each other?
I think that that's still being debated, if you'll pardon the unintentional pun. The last argument was about mics and should they be muted the way in which they were in the last debate.
So what reporters like yourself, what do you do with this debate? What's your plan of action?
Again, the Atlanta one was so strange because we were in the Georgia Tech arena, seated around the concourse, watching it on the Jumbotron. That was tough for me at Tar.
You go up the stairs of the Four Seasons Hotel. You go straight into the bar. They have this gorgeous bar. I've never been in the Atlanta Four Seasons where there wasn't somebody. Oh, hi. How you doing? Great, great, great. I mean, you watched. I
watched it in the arena, and then in Philadelphia, we'll see what it's like. But I was in the room, and then down on the spin room floor afterward. I think that'll be sort of the same trajectory.
Your plans for the big take into September, into Q4, David Gura?
Yeah, we are really going to be starting to draw. I mean, obviously, we talked about this last week when I was filling in for Paul. Labor Day is such a catalytic moment during a presidential campaign. Things really get up and running. We're going to be focusing a lot more on politics going forward here, so we'll definitely do an episode, at least an episode on that debate, and we're going to focus much more on the economic policies of both candidates going forward there.
Are you back from summer? I mean,
I'm back.
It's great.
I'm back.
Do you bring
No more
lobster
Fridays.
back with you? Do you have lobster?
It's in the igloo cooler at the desk just across the hall.
The Yeti cooler.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, that's how the kids do it. They bring the lobsters back from Maine.
Yeah. It's great. The Gura House orientation's great. Everybody just pulls out.
It's a staggered story. Got every kid in a different school. Doesn't start till Thursday.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to
Lisa
Texas.
knows.
Can I make another shameless plug?
Yes.
Please.
Going to Texas this weekend for the Texas Tribune Festival. I'm going to interview the Treasury Secretary on stage in Austin. So I'll have some.
This will be Janet Yellen.
Janet Yellen
David
for an
Gura.
hour on stage in Austin. I'll have some tape of that. Maybe I can come in Monday and play a little bit of that for you
Where's
as well.
this going to be? Austin?
Austin, Texas.
Are you just going for some,
I'll get some
fiddle
brisket.
thing?
No, rest
brisket.
assured, there'll be some brisket.
Janet
and all of
Yellen's at
that.
South by Southwest?
It's not South by Southwest. Now that would be we would get out the headline if that were
that
the
would be a
case.
headline.
No, Texas Tribune Festival.
Lisa,
but-
it was nice to see you
Tribune
today.
Festival, yeah.
Nice of you to
I mean,
drop
coming
by.
in. I mean,
Are you here
wow.
tomorrow?
Maybe.
Yes, she will be here tomorrow.
Oh, John answers unequivocally.
Yes.
Joining us now
We
in
need
the
more
studio,
seats in here.
Surveillance congestion correspondent. For those of you across the nation, in Boston and 92.9
Congestion
FM
pricing,
coming up
not
here. I mean, John Tucker, come on. It's Labor
Sinus
Day.
related.
We're supposed to be deep into congestion pricing. Is it dead?
Well, let's put it this way. It's on hold. It could be on hold temporarily. It could be on hold permanently. But I also say the Governor Hochul, who put it on hold either temporarily or permanently, she's taken a lot of flack for any number of things from Democrats.
That's a lot of money that was going to be.
It's over $1 billion a year in lost revenue.
Have they cut different projects?
Yeah,
Well,
repairs of all these stations, right?
What's that
I
now?
think a lot of subway station repairs have been on.
That's a lot of subway
You're a
stations,
ferryman.
and
I know you take the ferry, so.
I will do whatever I can to repair those subway stations.
David Gura, the big take. David Gura at the debate. Look for our
Thank you.
coverage there. John Tucker finally in at the crack of 9:55. Your daily look? Well, it's the Lisa Mateo hour. Where in God's name have you been? Tucker, a shadow of Lisa Mateo,
Exactly.
doing the newspapers. Go.
Oh, all right. The workforce is changing this year, okay? How? Gen Z workers expected to outnumber baby boomers in the U.S. workforce. Why is that an issue? Because the bosses don't know how to work with them. So Gen Z, born between 1997, 2012, just to give you that idea for those out there.
Okay.
So a lot of them entered the workforce remotely. So they didn't learn those workplace norms, all those communication skills. So now the Wall Street Journal is saying that companies are doing things like mentorships, trying to help them. They're giving them guidance how to communicate. They're even offering on-site therapists to talk with them and help them through this time as they start to go back to the work.
On-site therapists?
On-site therapists.
For who?
For these Gen Z workers who are now going to be outnumber the baby boomers in the workforce.
How old is Gen Z roughly? I can't keep them straight. There's
So
millennial.
they're born between 1997 and 2012. So
So it's like a
that's
brat
young.
summer. It's a
It's
brat
younger
group.
than the millennials. Yeah.
See, my first boss
need
on the Payne
therapists.
Weber trading
They
desk
need-
in 1986 just smacked me on the head every morning at 9:29 and said, "Don't lose money today."
That was it. That's what
That
you
was
got.
it.
And I did not.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't have a therapist, but okay.
Am I deficient in that I have zero sympathy? Like zero?
You're not alone. I'll just put it that way.
But we have to adapt. I
But-
would say, as managers,
Oh,
you
shut
need
up.
to
No,
adapt.
if
right?
they're going to outnumber the baby boomers, this is
Yep.
going to be
The
your,
Wall Street Journal says.
So that's what they're saying. You have to adapt because they want more meaning, more mentorship.
lose
They want a
money.
sense of purpose in their workday.
Okay.
Oh, you're just
My sense of
killing
purpose
me.
was, I mean,
could
I
see
had
you
a
at the
P&L.
kitchen table.
I had a P&L on my computer screen in my trading desk, and if I was positive, that was a good day. If it was negative, it was a bad day. And Johnny Coggins would come over.
Can you see Mateo in the kitchen?
No.
When one of the Gen Zers studying, she's throwing a pan.
That's it.
She's taking the Revere skillet. Shut up. Next.
All right, we go from Gen Z to Gen Alpha. They're even younger, so that's 14 and
Oh, you're
under.
killing me.
Okay, so
14
the
under.
Gen Alpha, they are into decluttering. They care more about the environment, but they also like to spend. So this is from Business Insider. Yes. So they're more selective, though, about their spending. So what they spend on. For example, I notice it, the Sephora spending.
Oh, I noticed that.
Yes.
During the pandemic.
The younger generation is spending a lot more on that. So, well, their parents' money.
Right.
They're also, here's something interesting, they're heading to the mall more often. So they like in-store purchasing rather than the online. So back in the day when I used to head to the mall. That was a thing.
Yep.
We kind of lost that, but now they're saying with Gen Alpha, it's starting to come back again.
Gen
Alpha,
It's the first time I've heard that. All I know is during the pandemic, Tom, I mean, when the whole world was shut down, the Sephora store across the street on Lexington Avenue, packed.
Yes.
But I would suggest we need a seamless-free, DoorDash-free September.
Yes.
Can we institute that?
I've removed the DoorDash app from my daughter's phone.
I'm sitting at home with a beverage in my hand, screaming, "Mr. Sweeney cut off his children.
Yep.
You will be too." That's what we're heading for September.
Set the example. This next story is from Bloomberg Screen Time. Really good because you're talking about media giants struggling with how to make money from the streaming live sports. ESPN held this meeting. They brought reporters in, so they started talking about what they're doing. They're focusing on streaming, fantasy sports, and gambling. So they talked about a couple of things. They have this thing called Flagship. They kind of nicknamed it this. It's this new service. It's going to integrate ESPN fantasy, betting platforms on schedule to launch around this time next year. No word on how much it's going to charge. And then Disney, you know about the whole thing with Venue, the $43 a month thing. That's kind of still going through legal issues.
I think that's DOA. I mean, the courts kind of shut it down, and it's a real...
And now's the time. This weekend, NFL.
Yeah, exactly.
Next.
Yep, so that's what it is. They're saying on the sports betting. And finally, this was in the Telegraph. The Titanic deteriorating 112 years after it sank. You had these underwater robots. They took images of the wreck. The railing of the bow, the Titanic, popular in the movie, right? That's where Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet had their first kiss. It's now at the bottom of the sea. So it's starting to break apart.
Like it fell off of the boat?
It fell off of the boat. It's at the bottom. That's a huge part of it. And so they're starting to see like the metal structure is starting to be eaten away. So, I mean, after 112 years, it's starting to show its age, I guess.
Wow. I mean, it's been 1912.
Yes.
April 15th, 1912. Is when the Titanic went down. Wow.
There is a small, lovely little park up Broadway, almost up to Columbia. Just a little tiny, beautifully, for the city of New York, landscape park. And it's in honor of, I believe it was the couple in the movie, the Astors or whatever, the older couple. Mm-hmm. And it's just very serene. And you can see the whole city was shaken by it.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
I mean, how many, you think about it.
Back then.
Exactly.
I mean, the movie, 1997, can you believe that?
Yeah, no.
Where are we talking? Yeah. We're talking like 35, whatever years, 25 years. I mean, there it is. And of course, it's Celine. Celine killed it. Highlight of the summer, Celine Dion at the Paris Olympics.
Yeah,
I mean, she nailed it.
She nailed it.
Bringing it.
She did. I mean, there was all that controversy and all that, and Celine was rock solid. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, bringing you the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app.